TheAnswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, following up on our conversation with law professor Richard Epstein about federal district courts interceding to slow down deportations, or attempt to, interceding to slow down terminations of federal workers, or at least attempting to. The federal courts interceding to stop the NIH from redefining the terms of grants provided to academic research institutions like med schools. This is the subject of an excellent piece over at City Journal from Heather MacDonald, the Thomas W. Smith Fellow, that is, at the Manhattan Institute, and author of When Race Trumps Merit, How the Pursuit of Equity Sacrifices Excellence, Destroys Beauty, and Threatens Lives. And she joins us now to discuss it. Heather, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Dan and Amy.
So here's another group of individuals that are and institutions that are heavily reliant on federal largesse, and they like the way things were, and they don't want restrictions on how the grants that they are used to getting are spent, and the distribution of that spend as well. The 15% limit on effectively overhead has these institutions up in arms.
Yeah, this has been a very clarifying moment, because in this litigation over this attempted cap on overhead costs that the federal government funnels into universities, we've just learned that taxpayers subsidize private and public universities beyond anything anybody thought. We thought there was the awful student loans that allow colleges to continue jacking up tuitions to just obscene levels, and occasional the science funding. But in fact, we're giving them untraceable money that goes into the bureaucratic maw and can never be accounted for. For every dollar that we give a university for medical research or science research, a term that can include research in how the United States oppresses trans individuals, or the way that racism is the source of black disease and shortened lives. So it can be completely politicized research. For every dollar that the taxpayers give for this research, they provide an additional 69 cents at times for indirect costs, that then the 69 cents disappears into the university and never gets accounted for. The Trump administration said, look, universities accept almost zero overhead from private foundations, so why should we be giving them 69 cents on the dollar? We're going to cap it at 15 cents on the dollar, at 15% of a research grant. That, it seems radical to the universities, but in fact, it is bringing things into alignment with the private sector. When private companies also sometimes contract with universities to do research, they too pay zero. So this is one of the biggest hits yet of the Trump administration, excuse me, to try to bring universities into a reasonable size and to start paying attention to the grotesquely ballooning bureaucracies that they have put on over the last 3 decades that have absolutely nothing to do with education, a heck of a lot to do with identity politics, and simply with the idea that students are these fragile creatures that need thousands of bureaucrats to hold their hands to get them through college.
So It's not just the research funding choices themselves. Like to use one of the more comical examples, Trump talks about the funding to research transing mice. But it's not just that you're choosing to fund that research. It's also that you're funding at a ridiculous level because that funding is being used for feather bedding all of these academics and their salaries. That's the real rub here. And the comparison to private research foundations is perfect because, of course, there's obviously much more judicious with their marginal dollar than the government has been. And that's what the Trump administration is trying to change.
Exactly, and it's not so much that it's funding academics, although it is funding the entire diversity infrastructure, but it's funding the bureaucrats. But we actually don't even know what it's doing because the key to indirect costs, when a college gives a grant application, it has to itemize the direct costs. What cyclotron is going to be used, what is the faculty that is doing the research going to be paid, what are the graduate students going to be paid, what are the lab mice going to cost. But then it gets the overhead, the 69 cents on the dollar. Those are not itemized. The rate is bargained for every 4 years with the federal government, and once the rate for any given college is arrived at, that then applies to every single grant from other agencies as well. So you can, again, be doing a grant that is simply to enroll trans people in a health survey, and you're going to be getting the same overhead costs as somebody or generating the same overhead costs as somebody who is doing highly lab-intensive research on cancer transmission, and all of the normal rules of economics that we would expect if this was really a legitimate fund of administration don't apply. The bigger the university, you don't get any economies of scale. The bigger the university it tends to be, the bigger their overhead cost rate, and the bigger their endowment, the less nobody says, okay, well, we'll dip into our endowment to fund this. Heaven forbid we touch this incredibly lavish fund that we want to just keep generating its hedge fund interest rates. And you also, again, you don't see any distinction between the type of research. Once you get that 69% rate, that's going to apply to stuff that has absolutely no administrative overhead.
But isn't the rate negotiated with the government?
It's negotiated every 4 years or so, an elaborate process. But the government, it's a cottage industry. The government people that are doing the negotiating, they have little incentive to keep costs down, and there's a revolving door between the government regulators and there is now a huge cottage industry of firms that help the universities bargain with the government, and the government regulators are looking to get very cushy jobs with these firms. The cost of using these firms in these negotiations itself becomes part of the indirect cost rate. So it is a slush fund all around.
You're just funding an ecosystem, right? I mean, it's like the way I sort of analogize it as you're talking through it is, because we've done this like with the Chicago public school system, it's $30,000 a kid. Okay, so that's 30 kids in a classroom, that's $900,000. Teacher makes $100,000, let's say, $150 burden with the benefits. Debt service on the building, materials costs, and so on and so forth. Okay, whatever that is. But you still have a gap in every classroom of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where does that money go?
Yeah.
And it goes to, basically to fund the overarching bureaucracy that is ever expanding. And we've seen the same thing at the collegiate level where administrative staff has exploded in comparison to student enrollment growth.
And that's absolutely right, Dan. And these administrators, it's just the most mind-boggling set of vacuous functions, assistant coordinators of outreach and external relations, student success managers, senior coordinators of student accountability, health promotion specialists, vice presidents of institutional strategic planning, advisors to vice presidents of academic. It just goes on and on and on. There is no sense of a careful, dedicated stewardship of taxpayer dollars. We thought that the tuitions were bad enough. The tuitions were just grotesque, but they're getting even more than the tuitions. They're getting vast amounts of taxpayer dollars taken from people that are not going to college, that are struggling with blue-collar jobs, that are sending 69 cents on the dollar to Harvard to feed its bureaucracy.
And then to pay for the student loans for kids that went to Harvard.
Right. There should be there should be really no more federal government loans. We've got too many people going to college in the first place, but that's what these bureaucrats do. That's what the retention specialists do. They have yield management specialists to try and get out there, beat the bushes, try and get as many warm butts on first-year college seats as possible, and who cares if they drop out next because they brought in their first year of federal loans. So we have traveled so far from any sense that there's a precious institutional heritage, civilizational heritage to pass on. The role of the faculty is to do that. You do not need the whole safetiest bureaucracy that is there, telling students that they've got mental illness, they need all their wellness centers, and we should be lean and mean and say to these kids, you are the luckiest people on earth to be getting a college education. You've got 4 years to cram into your empty noggins as much knowledge as possible, and we're going to do that in a lean and mean fashion. Read books and shut up.
Read books and shut up. I like it. Heather MacDonald, Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, author of When Race Trumps Merit, How the Pursuit of Equity Sacrifices Excellence, Destroys Beauty, and Threatens Lives. When Race Trumps Merit is the book. Heather, thanks as always.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Dan and Amy.
Thank you. And she joined us on our, turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
You heard me talk about Relief Factor and how so many people enjoy a better, more pain-free life because of it. If you're dealing with everyday pain, it makes sense you'd want to try it first. Well, Relief Factor makes that pretty